of the globe can understand why what happens in Africa has a huge impact on all of our lives in ways we might never even know. Because of my background, I am well aware of the vibrancy of this continent, and I want to show that to the world. People of my continent do deserve to be heard. We are rich in ways beyond the soil beneath our feet.
One World with Zain Asher, weeknights on CNN.
I'm Becky Anderson, 200 meters above the city of Dubai. This is CNN.
The news continues, so let's hand it over to Laura Coates in CNN Tonight. Laura.
John, thank you so much. I'm Laura Coates, and this is CNN Tonight. You know, when it comes to persuading your jury, here's what every prosecutor knows. You tell them what you're going to tell them, you tell them that, and then you told them what you told them. But beware, the jury is going to have to keep you honest, and they will hold you accountable. That's why for so many, you under-promise and then you over-deliver, which leads you right to that moment when you have more than satisfied your burden of proof. There's no room for any reasonable doubt. Well, last night's hearing was that tell them what you're going to tell them part. Now, there were moments where they teased the actual telling, the testimony of prominent figures who were relevant, not just because of their proximity to then President Trump, but also maybe for the role they played within the government. Maybe as a member of Congress or a White House aide, or maybe they were playing the role of lawyer in a courtroom, trying to convince a judge of a big lie. I wonder if it surprised any of you to see testimony as part of that tell 'em part from one-time Trump loyalists like former Attorney General Bill Barr, calling Trump's stolen election like, quote, bullshit, unquote. Was it surprising to hear, say, Ivanka Trump, even saying that she believed Barr, saying that she respected him? Over her own father, she believed him when it came to his unsubstantiated claims of mass voter fraud. It altered her perspective, I believe she said. Did it further surprise you that to see her own father pushing back at her testimony today in a social media post saying, quote, Ivanka was not involved in looking at or studying election results. She had long since checked out. Or did it surprise you to hear one injured Capitol police officer who described the hell that she went through, the carnage she witnessed, saying that she was even slipping on a fellow officer's blood? Or maybe the words of Committee Vice Chair Liz Cheney, saying how some House Republicans allegedly lobbied the Trump White House after January 6th for pardons. The Republican herself, you know, is extremely vulnerable in her own seat. She lost her conference leadership post because she wouldn't toe the GOP line on any of this. They called her a rhino in many parts of the GOP, and now she's at risk of losing her seat in Congress. But it seemed, if yesterday was any indication, none of that is holding her back from speaking her mind.
I say this to my Republican colleagues who are defending the indefensible. There will come a day when Donald Trump is gone, but your dishonor will remain.
Well, what she hopes remains in the brains of those listening, and she and the rest of the panel are trying to drill in on and hone in on, is whether former President Trump or anyone in his close orbit may have been involved in this violent plot. And, you know, we could be closer than ever to actually learning those answers.
Are there going to be witnesses that describe actual conversations between these extremist groups and anyone in Trump's orbit?
Yes.
There will be?
Yes.
Definitively, yes, he says. Well, so the committee is really saying, stay tuned. But of course, remember what the prosecutors would know if this were a criminal courtroom. Because now comes the work. This is now the tell them part, AKA the time when you got to deliver the goods, not just the soundbite, but the context that proves it's not deceptively cherry-picked somehow or can be easily refuted. But if they can substantiate the preview, if they can prove the preview, you know, their job doesn't exactly end there. If this were a criminal trial, you'd ask for the jury to find the defendant guilty of X, Y, and Z. You'd actually know who the defendant is. But this isn't a criminal court, and it's not precisely clear if there is a singular target. And this is, after all, a congressional chamber. And they're going to have to make a case differently than a criminal prosecution, not for a conviction, but for the American electorate to understand what it was like to have a republic, only one we couldn't keep. They have to make the case for still caring about what happened on January 6th in June of the following year. And they have to make the case of how they're going to be able to use their legislative and oversight functions and powers to prevent that from having been a dry run on January 6th, let alone a blueprint. And it's really who they're going to have to make their case to, who their jury, so to speak, will be, their audience. That might present their biggest challenge. I mean, the question is it the entire electorate? Is it one political party? Is it the choir, the converted, or the non-believers? Or is it the Department of Justice and the very branch that does have the power to pursue criminal charges? Now, here's what we do know about this television audience of pseudo-jurors. A lot of people were watching last night's main event. In fact, more than 20 million people tuned in, according to a preliminary Nielsen tally. You know, that's 20 million. That's more than this year's Olympics viewership average. It's on par with the ratings of, say, a Sunday night football game, but perhaps nowhere near, say, the numbers a presidential debate might draw, but still 20 million. The next public hearings are set for Monday and Wednesday and Thursday, and a lot more information is being promised. So here comes the part where you tell them what you said you tell them. But whose voices will they hear? And what will they see? And will it be enough to get you over? Let's see what we can learn and gather from one of those panel members on what to expect. Congresswoman Stephanie Murphy, Democrat from Florida. Welcome to CNN Tonight, Congresswoman. How are you?
It's great to be with you.
You know, a lot of questions now, since we've seen at least the preliminary day of hearings, the first public hearings, hearing the testimony of one of the officers, learning from a documentarian, hearing those snippets of people who are certainly central to the Trump orbit. What were you hoping to convey most from last night?
I think that after last night's hearing, that the American people should understand that we are about to lay out through a series of hearings that January 6th didn't happen by accident, that it happened because there was somebody who was willing to subvert the will of the American people in order to ensure his will to stay in power, and that was Donald Trump. And there were a number of people around him, some who were accomplices and some who decided that their morality and their conscience wouldn't allow them to move forward. And so it was a bottom line up front preview of the next hearings that are going to come across. And then in those hearings, we were going to provide the detail, much like we did in the first hearing, in first person testimonies as well as documentation, to have the American people hear, not in my voice, not in the voices of necessarily the members of this committee, but rather in the voices of the people around former President Trump, who either knew better and didn't do well, or knew better and pieced out of the situation so that they wouldn't be caught up in what they thought was either morally or criminally objective.
There's a lot of information to synthesize, and I know you began with the likes of the Attorney General, Bill Barr, and just the idea of the highest law enforcement officer in the land at one time calling BS. You know, he did not abbreviate the term, but calling BS, which really had me wondering about the idea of how you were trying to piece together the question that a lot of people were asking when January 6th happened, which was, what was the President of the United States doing and thinking and saying while we were all watching what was unfolding? Are you confident that you'll be able to answer that question through various conduits that are credible? And will it stand to be able to withstand those who are already doubting and saying, no, I never said that? Congressman Steve Perry, for example, I never asked for a pardon. Others saying there was out of context. I see you tilt your head because I could already anticipate you realizing these are going to be the retorts people will give you. What do you do to withstand that scrutiny?
What I am trying to do is not to convince the Scott Perrys or the people who have already committed the kinds of moral and maybe potentially criminal decisions. What I am trying to do is, as a committee, lay out the facts for the American people. And what I'm asking of the American people is that they set aside their partisan affiliations, not a Republican, not a Democrat, not an independent, but rather think about what our democracy means. What does it mean for you to come to the polls and cast your vote? Can you still feel like your vote is counted? And just because your team doesn't win doesn't mean that you get an opportunity to try to dismantle this democracy so that your team can stay in power. And our democracy is dependent on the rule of law, the process, as well as a peaceful transition of power. And so I'm trying to make that pitch to the American people, whatever their political affiliations.
Congresswoman Stephanie Murphy, thank you so much for your time. We'll look forward to seeing it all unfold in front of us. I appreciate it. I want to talk now to someone who was there in the room for the hearings, aka in the room where it happens. And he is also the D.C. Metropolitan Police officer who's seen here, trapped in a doorway as rioters attacked him with his own baton during the insurrection. Difficult even now to watch this. Daniel Hodges joins me now. Officer Daniel Hodges, thank you for being a part of the program tonight. It's difficult for me as a viewer and witness to watch this. It's very difficult, I understand, for you to see this still, even more than a year later. How did it feel to be in that courtroom last night? I mean, you see the chamber. I keep calling it a courtroom because I really did witness, in many respects, a laying out of a case against someone. What did it feel like for you to be in that room?
I was glad to be there. Watching footage from that day always makes my blood pressure shoot up, makes my heart race. But I'm very glad that there's a preponderance of the evidence, so to speak, and I'm glad that I was able to see it there, and I'm glad that the American people have been able to see it.
What do you hope will be the outcome? I was just talking to a congresswoman who is a part of the committee, and obviously their role is legislative. What do you hope will be the results and outcomes of these hearings?
I hope that at the end of these hearings, there will be accountability in some form for those responsible for what happened that day. I hope that Merrick Garland is watching. I hope that the Justice Department can move forward in criminal matters to charge those and make sure that they face accountability.
Does that include those who might be still members of Congress or people who are in the upper echelons of government who may have been powers that be, so to speak?
Absolutely. The members of Congress, part of what was said last night was that multiple Republican members of Congress sought pardons from President Trump at the time. And what the American people need to know is that, I believe it's according to Burdick versus the United States Supreme Court case, in order to accept a presidential pardon, you have to admit guilt. So they knew that they committed a crime. They knew that whatever crime they committed was so egregious, they didn't even want to wait to find out whether they were going to get caught. They immediately sought a pardon. So they knew they committed a crime, and they knew that they needed to get it pardoned immediately. So whatever they are guilty of, if it amounts to sedition, then they are, it sounds hyperbolic, but they are the enemy of the people. They do not deserve to be in Congress.
In many ways, Chairman Benny Thompson initiated the hearing last night, talking about the oath of office and reminding the American public about the way it changed following the Civil War, and invoking former President Lincoln on that very point about the idea of swearing this oath to defend, domestic terrorists, enemies, foreign and domestic, on this very notion. I often wonder, for people who have been watching, and the time has gone by for different reasons for those of the electorate, but for you and for your colleagues to hear, another officer yesterday, Officer Edwards, speaking about what happened, to relay her experience, Behind her, there were widows of officers lost in the line of duty, experiencing what you have recalled, the mother of Brian Sicknick. What is the morale like for you when you reflect on the role you played to defend the Capitol? Have your views changed over time about what that means to you?
My views haven't changed. I was proud during, I was proud afterwards, and I'm still proud of the work I did that day. You know, I think the only semi-negative emotion that I hear from other officers is everyone wishes they could have done more. Everyone wishes that we could have kept them out completely. Unfortunately, we were just so completely outnumbered and overwhelmed that that was impossible. But we did everything we could, and we're definitely proud of the work we did that day.
As you should be, and we'll be looking to see whether there is anyone who has offended the pride of the nation. Officer Daniel Hodges, thank you so much for being a part of today's program and your continued effort to try to aid in the American public's illumination of what happened that day. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And there is other big news to get to tonight. We cannot, for one moment, forget about Uvalde. These victims and families, they too deserve answers. And the school police chief being blamed for the slow response, you see him right there, to the massacre, he's just given his first extensive interview in which he said he didn't know he was the one in charge that day, among a lot of other things. In fact, one of the reporters he spoke to is going to join us next. And that's a conversation I want to have. We'll be right back.
All new African Voices Changemakers. Create opportunities. Impact communities. Transform lives. Meet the photographers who are capturing stories on equality and social justice.
I felt that it was my responsibility to document our realities.
African Voices Changemakers, this weekend on CNN, in association with Glow.
Populations of wildlife need genetic diversity to be resilient, to be able to survive. You get that resilience and you get that genetic diversity by having mixing. You know, you have mixing of jaguars from the northern part of Belize with jaguars of the southern part of Belize. And that means that wildlife need to find their way through that tiny sliver of forest. Imagine you're getting squeezed on both sides, right? Your forest cover is going. In this particular case, it's mostly due to large-scale mechanized monocrop or agriculture that's taking place. We are here at the Cox Lagoon wetland, which is actually a very critical and important part of a 30,000-acre parcel of land that we have just purchased to protect in perpetuity for the people and government of Belize. Hope is the last thing to keep you standing. You know, when there is no hope, then that's it.
I think that there's an understanding that wellness and fitness and well-being is important in a COVID world. And that is certainly what we're seeing. Not only are we seeing a significant demand for membership across our estate, but we're also seeing an increase in usage, existing members using the clubs more. And that on top of hybrid working, you know, we've got lots of data that tell us that members are going to not go into the office as much. We're a suburban-based business. We're seeing people come and use the clubs differently. And that is all positive for us. So on the negative side, we've got an increase in the cost base, but on the positive side, we've got a greater demand for what we're offering. I think someone has to be absolutely committed to improving their mental and physical well-being, but we will hold their hand every step of the way.
So for the first time, the Uvalde school police chief is giving his side of the story, essentially defending last month's police response to the massacre where 19 children and 2 teachers were murdered. In an interview with the Texas Tribune, guided by his attorney, Chief Pete Arredondo says he never considered himself the incident commander. He also blamed the delayed action on the classroom's steel-enforced doors, that there was no way to break them down, that they had to wait for the right keys, he said. Now, CNN has reached out to Texas safety officials in the school district for comment. But according to Arredondo's attorney, the chief isn't giving out any more interviews at this time. James Barragan is one of the reporters who spoke to Chief Arredondo for the Texas Tribune, and he joins me now. James, I'm glad you're here. I have to tell you, we've all been waiting to hear from this chief in some form or capacity. I'm actually a little bit surprised that at this point in, several weeks later, he is saying that he didn't think he was the incident commander. First of all, could that be right? And 2, why is he only saying that now?
Hi, Laura. Thanks for having me on your show. And I think that is the question that so many people have had in terms of, was he the incident commander? If it wasn't him, who was it, or who was it supposed to be? But he is telling, or at least he told us in our interview definitively, that he went in there, he never thought he was the incident commander, never identified himself as the incident commander, and really never gave an order for any officers to stand down for breaching the room. You've alluded to some of the points that he's made in the interview in terms of sort of giving some context as to why it took law enforcement more than an hour to get inside the room. And I think that really was his goal, to explain sort of the law enforcement response, because he's cognizant, obviously, that this has become a national story and that every move is being scrutinized.
What was his attitude in terms of describing why his reason to tell you he was not the incident commander? Did he believe that he was being scapegoated? Was he trying to ensure people knew that there were other people involved? What was the motivation he explained?
Well, he was very clear that he was not trying to point the finger at anyone else, at any other agency. And he made very clear that he was proud of the law enforcement response, not just from his police department or the city's police department, but every agency that responded. But he is also a member of the community. You know, he grew up there. He went to Robb Elementary. He spent the first 16 years of his career at the Uvalde Police Department. And he knew some of the victims in the shooting. So it's very close to him. And he told us that he hadn't spoken out of respect for the families that were grieving, but he wanted to, at this point, several weeks out, give that context that he thought was needed for what he thought was inaccurate or incomplete information that had been released by state and law enforcement authorities so far.
It's not your job to defend him. I know you are the reporter who is bringing the information that we so desperately want. I just have to sort of raise my eyebrow in incredulity here to think of the word proud being used in terms of the police response in the same sentence. But one of the things he spoke about is the steel jam door. This has played a significant role in his response to you. In fact, he discusses that maybe the safety protocols that were in place within the school worked against the response. Tell me why.
Right. It's not our job to defend his actions. We don't pass judgment on the actions. And I would encourage all your viewers to go read our story and decide for themselves. But to your point about these these reinforced doors that he's talking about, he is telling us, and I think this is a new detail that hasn't been reported before, that he checked the door for the classroom where the gunman was, trying to see if he can get inside and see if law enforcement officers could get inside and contain the shooter. He checked the door, found that it was locked, and then that created a whole new set of problems, because these doors are sort of the response that we as a society have had to potential active shooter incidents. They're designed to be very safe for the people who are inside, usually students and teachers, and very difficult for people on the outside, theoretically attackers, to break it in or get inside. But when the gunman was able to get inside the classroom, that is when Arredondo says sort of the situation gets flipped, and it becomes very difficult for law enforcement to get inside, break down the door, as people have suggested, and now the shooter is inside, very safe, with potential victims, and that's what caused the delay. He then asked for keys or extrication tools, and those were a long time coming.
You know, I do encourage everyone to read this really important piece, to give that information, to give that context, and also to really dive into that notion of the barricade versus the active shooter component that really stems apart, is dovetailing perfectly from that conversation about the steel doors as well. James Barragan, thank you so much for bringing us this information. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
There's reaction ahead from a Texas state senator who's been demanding answers from Uvalde officials from the start. So why is he just now hearing it like the rest of us? Does he believe Chief Arredondo's account? We're going to ask him. Next.
On Culinary Journeys, meet Japan's Natsuko Shoji, a chef earning rave reviews. Inspired by art, she is a rising star in French cuisine and in an industry where men dominate. See how she overcame life's challenges despite the odds and is now paving the way for a new generation. Culinary Journeys, Sunday on CNN, in association with Ajinomoto.
We're here now at the home of one of the FSB team, and my name's Clarissa Ward. I work for CNN. Was it your team that poisoned Navalny?
It's just been a chaotic scene here. People are so exhausted. Just gonna help her carry this bag.
We were just in the hospital. It was shocking. Why do you think India has been hit so badly? Scores of Taliban fighters, and just behind us, the U.S. Embassy.
Why does a small group of women asking for their right to be educated threaten you so much?
Raise your hand if you love school.
I'm the one who has to look them in the eye. Can I have your word? These people are depending on you.
You can hear gunshots every couple minutes. And now they're pressing in. They want desperately to tell their story.
For World Sport, I'm Amanda Davis, and this is CNN.
David McKenzie in Cape Town, and this is CNN.
So as you just saw, embattled Uvalde School Police Chief Pete Arredondo is finally speaking out, this time in an interview with the Texas Tribune. And he's defending the hour-long delay where law enforcement did not confront the gunman who gunned down 19 children and 21 adults for a period of time. Joining me now, Texas State Senator Roland Gutierrez, who represents Uvalde. Senator, thank you for joining me tonight. I wonder what your immediate reaction is to this reporting that he is now saying, several weeks out, that he didn't think he was even the incident commander. What's your reaction to that? I think we're having trouble hearing the state senator. I'm not hearing you, sir. Are we able to get his, let's get his sound up, because I really, given all the work that he's done to try to get information from the officials, we've heard his voice probably more than any other voice in this investigation thus far. And so what he has to say is really important. And I'm going to just make sure we hear it. So let's take a second to get it right, to regroup, because the voices we invite on this show are the ones we need to listen to. Let's go to a quick break. We'll be right back.
Our mission is to see this young generation of leaders growing up make change in the world. My name is Edlira Debrane, and I'm the Communications Officer of Finnish School of Kosovo here in Kosovo, Europe. We created a Wall of Freedom, which is still in our halls. We organized a bake sale where we collected over 500 euros, which are going to be donated to an organization against domestic violence. I would say the one that we are most proud of is the Set in Stone Garden. For over a month, each student gathered rocks. We took these rocks, we wrote down our vows and pledges to end modern-day slavery, and then we took all those rocks outside in the middle of our schoolyard, and we spelled out My Freedom Day. So we had this really cool shot where everybody was shouting out My Freedom Day, sort of like a symbolic way to say that our pledges are actually set in stone and they will remain there forever. This, I believe, has made a very long-lasting impact on them, and it's something that they have vowed to actually take on in the following months. You'll see them around the school still doing other things for My Freedom Day.
Connect the world with Becky Anderson.
It all starts here. Changing, fighting, creating, connecting. That's why we're here. We live here, we work here, we're from here, and we'll go wherever the story takes us.
I'm Becky Anderson in Tehran.
We are in Jerusalem. Real news that shapes our world. Exploring not just what's going on, but why.
I just want to press you on one further point.
Getting perspective on this region from this region. Places that many of us know, but few of us get to see. observing countries on the move, still rooted in tradition. It all starts here, and that's why we're here, bringing you the world from our Middle Eastern hub.
Connect the World with Becky Anderson, Monday through Friday on CNN.
For World Sport, I'm Don Riddell, and this is CNN.
All right, thanks for sticking with us. We've got the audio kinks all worked out with Texas State Senator Roland Gutierrez, who represents Uvalde. And I'm so glad that you're here because I really wanted to speak with you in particular, given all that you have done to try to get information to the community, to the nation at large about what's happening in Uvalde. What was your reaction to the Texas Tribune reporter's article where Arradondo says he didn't know he was incident commander?
Yeah, Laura, and essentially now we have these two competing narratives. We have the Tribune article, we have the New York Times article that came in within an hour after the Legislative Committee hearing ended. DPS is saying one thing, that's our state troopers, and Arradondo saying another. It's a real cause for concern. What I want to know from the people that are accountable to the state legislature, and what I've been asking for all along, is how many DPS troopers were in there, what other law enforcement entities were in there, in that hallway within that span of 45 minutes. And we have yet to get that information.
I was going to say, I mean, those are pretty basic questions. You know, it doesn't have to go to extensive reporting, just these answers. Why is it, do you think, the answers are not coming? I mean, the lawyer in me says, and I'm always skeptical of people, is it a matter of lawyering up? Is it a matter of trying to get your story straight, to smell like roses? What is it? Why don't we know more?
You know, Laura, this was admittedly by Steve McCraw, this was a breakdown in law enforcement protocols. Admittedly, this was law enforcement failure. And I think that there's always this thing where everybody wants to point the fingers at each other, but clearly law enforcement failed at every level, the local level, the sheriff level, the state trooper level. At every level, there was system failure and human error. We have to get beyond that. We can't be hiding behind a criminal investigation. We need accountability and transparency so that this never happens again. As a policymaker, I'm concerned that the governor has put $4 billion on the border, and the law enforcement entity that was there probably had 40 or 50 cops on scene, wasn't part of the solution of breaking into that room faster. These are real questions that need to be answered. And heretofore, we haven't gotten those answers.
Well, there are some, you know, there's the DOJ, the legislature. They're vowing to try to investigate what's happened, to put some, I guess, intellectual muscle and support behind this as well. But do you have any confidence? I mean, just given the systemic errors that you have already articulated, do you have concern, and should the greater world have concern about the ability to really get and drill down to the details that will help this community, not just me and you understanding, but those who have been victimized, those who are living with this day in, day out, who deserve to have the answers? Do you have confidence that's going to happen?
I think as of yesterday, I saw perversion of the process. Someone from either DPS or the governor's office or someone in the House leaked out much of that reporting from that legislative committee hearing. Arradondo here again does his own interview yesterday with this other media group and has perverted the process to a certain degree. We've got a district attorney who's saying, well, we're going to wait because we've got maybe some criminality we're looking at. All I'm asking is logistical positioning. I want to know which law enforcement agency was in that hallway. That is transparency that we need to have, and those parents need to have. You know, we've been hearing a lot about democracy these days. Without transparency, we don't have democracy.
You know, I mean, it's so well said. And the idea of just think of, you know, in journalism, we think about the who, what, when, where, why, how. The fact that we can't yet get past the who, and here we are with funeral services, with grieving families, with people desperate to understand, and here you are trying to get those answers. I see this as it's very emotional, and I know that it continues to be for the community, because we can't forget that this is a community. We are people who are trying to grapple with this. State Senator Roland Gutierrez, thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you so much.
Excuse me. Now, the rough economic picture is getting rougher. The Dow, I'll have a sip of tea. because I don't want to have a frog in my throat. Here's what we know. The Dow tanked this afternoon with inflation. I got a break. What's going on? Am I getting choked up? We'll be right back.
When you grow more, you'll naturally have more to balance. With an expanding community of female entrepreneurs and 22% of working Africans starting businesses, support for new and growing enterprises across the continent has never been more important. Access Bank's digital loans have so far provided over 260 billion naira to upwards of 1.8 million customers and counting. Access, more than banking.
The world's biggest business stories in one place. Expert analysis from every corner of the globe. Marketplace Africa, Asia, Europe and Middle East. With CNNBusiness.com.
Once in a generation opportunity.
Technology, innovation, business. Heard it all before? But have you heard it like this?
The ultimate disruptor looks set to shake up our world. We really can't ignore the impact that this has. What can we do that explores a fresh angle? So let's untangle the players and political forces. The truth is a lot more complex. What's really going on?
Fast-paced news, in-depth reports, and fact checks from the perspective of The Global Brief with Bianca Nobilo. Weeknights on CNN.
We share this place, we all belong. We have to restore this planet's soul. Teach it something more than what we know. Give it water, give it sun, room to grow. I can see a better tomorrow. I can see a better tomorrow.
So Star Trek 2 was in theaters the last time we saw prices that were rising this fast. And you might not know, but I am a real Trekkie. I just can't do the hand thing. But the painful reality is today's inflation numbers are now the highest in 40 years, even as more people go back to work. The reality is we're all paying more for just about everything. The president today, well, he had lots of blame ready.
Putin's price hike is hitting America hard. Exxon made more money than God this year.
But when it comes to solutions, well, the administration says this.
We are open to ideas.
Well, let's discuss those ideas that you're open to. Now with the senior advisor to the president, Gene Sperling. Gene, thank you for joining me tonight. What are these ideas? Because as President Biden spoke about, as your colleague spoke about, you're open to ideas. What are the ideas that you have for the table and for the American people?
You know, look, Laura, I think the president is leveling with people and letting them know that these gas prices are global phenomenon, that they are very much caused by the unthinkable war of aggression in Ukraine. You know, that's not a shift of blame. That's just a description. Prices were $3.31 on January 17th when Putin started doing military exercises in Belarus. They're $4.99 right now, and they've had higher jumps in other countries. Now, that's not any comfort to any American going to the gas pump, but it is the fact that we are all suffering from this, again, this unthinkable aggression. What the president's made clear is he gets it. Yes, we've had record job growth. Yes, we have 3.6% unemployment. Yes, 4.2 million people have come back into the workforce. Those are all signs of a recovery that is still going. But for an American family, as you were saying, going up to the gas pump, going through the grocery line, you know, they're getting hit by higher prices than they should need to. Now, we're not going to pretend there is a, silver bullet that's going to stop the global phenomenon of the gas price going up. But doesn't mean there's not things we can do. The president's already released a historic amount of oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. He's already allowed E15 gasoline to be available to put some downward pressures. He called today for legislation to prevent the exorbitant hikes on shipping that are being passed on to Americans, to do other measures that Congress can do with them to, that might not directly hit gas, but still lower the price that families are paying in prescription drugs, internet, utility bills. And finally, yes, we're glad that natural gas production is at record levels, that oil production is at near record levels. But yes, you heard the president say today, he sees the record profits by the big oil companies, and he wants to make sure that everyone is asking, are they doing enough to bring back the 800,000 barrels a day of refinery capacity they closed down, to use the permits they have, and to make sure that their focus is more supply, lower prices for American families, and not record profits?
Well, I can turn the question back to the administration, of course, Gene. Is the administration doing enough and at a pace that actually is commensurate with what you're seeing of the fast pace of the rising inflation? I mean, you had Secretary Janet Yellen on Tuesday saying that tariff reductions could help bring down the prices as just one particular option and one idea. On Sunday, Commerce Secretary said it may make sense to lift some tariffs on goods. What is the administration's response to that notion? Those are two ideas. Those might offer some solutions, not only in the long term, but in the short run. What state of play are we in?
Well, you're right. I think there are lots of different things that we can do. And you saw the president reduce some tariffs on solar equipment coming into the United States to also keep prices lower. There's some things we could do that he can do on his own. With the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure bill, he was able to get companies to commit together to offer lower, even free internet service for up to 48 million households. That's something he could rally. There's rally companies and others to commit to. But, Laura, there's so much more we could do if we had some cooperation from Congress. This shipping prices, company after company says the exorbitant profits and the exorbitant price hikes of shipping companies bringing products into the U.S. is being passed on directly to consumers. We can stop that. We can at least reduce the pressure of prescription drug price by letting prices that families are paying, the same families, by allowing Medicare to negotiate with companies and bring down those prices. And I think the president has made very clear that he is willing to look at other measures related more directly to gas prices. But listen, this is a global phenomenon. There is not a silver bullet to this Russian aggression at the moment. The fact that the president's being straight about that, but also making clear we're willing to do every single thing we can to help bring down gas prices. And look, you do see that forecasters do project that prices will moderate this year, but we understand, again, that's of little comfort when people, are seeing the $4.99 at the gas pump and getting another, disappointing inflation report today.
Yeah. Gene Sperling, we look forward to hearing more from the administration. I mean, as the gas prices are rising, some people's bank accounts are really running on fumes, as you can imagine. Thank you for your time tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Laura. Appreciate you having me.
Well, we've got an amazing true crime story. I'm telling you, it's more than 40 years. More than 40 years have passed after a husband and wife were murdered. Now, their daughter, who's known as Baby Holly, is found alive and well. That's actually her holding the picture of her with her parents. My next guest is a big part of the reason why Baby Holly was found. And look at how she used science to solve 2 mysteries. And will it help in the search for justice? We'll talk about it when CNN Tonight returns.
All right, you guys ready?
Alex Jones.
Those thought patterns, the 3 percenters, QAnon group, or the anti-vaxxers, they all originate from Alex.
How much damage can one man do to school shooting victims?
Alex Jones lied about Sandy Hook.
And the country.
The people who listen to him believe the things that he says.
CNN asks those who know him.
He's not like you or me.
Truth doesn't really matter at all.
CNN Special Report, Megaphone for Conspiracy. Alex Jones, Monday on CNN.
What are the leading companies going to be talking about in the next 2 to 3 years from a talent perspective? It will be about skills. It will be about the use of AI to help their people develop their skills and to transform organizations. We know that skills are becoming obsolete very fast because of the change in digital and the use of technology. And it also enables you to open up the talent pipeline. So for example, in the US, we will hire 20% of our entry-level hiring this year will be into our apprenticeship program. Our apprenticeship program does not focus on 4-year degrees. It focuses on skills and potential. We also have a database of all of the skills of our client-facing people, and we can use algorithms to identify who can be upskilled into new hot areas.
Out front tonight, a potential breakthrough in treating coronavirus.
We've gotten very little help from the federal government.
Could all this spending lead to a bigger economic crisis? One of our viewers saw you last night on the show. She says she's going to pay your rent this month. Shut up. I want to go now to an incredible story of survival. Would you do it all again in terms of being a nurse, knowing that that could put you at risk for this?
I want to help people more than I ever have.
Aaron Burnett out front on CNN.
For World Sport, I'm Alex Thomas, and this is CNN.
Business is all about making connections. But some connections are easier to make than others. With a CNN partner hotel, the world is always at your fingertips. CNN partner hotels, connected to your world.
I'm Paulo Sandoval in Bogota, Colombia, and this is CNN.
Listen to this story. A baby who vanished more than 40 years ago